Level 1. The Crash Magnets Walking Red Flags. These guys didn't race, they just tested how many barriers you could kiss before retirement. If there was a pileup, check the replay. They were probably in it. Nikita Mazepin. He spun before finishing his first lap in Bahrain. Not under pressure, not battling, just lost the car, all by himself. That single moment defined Nikita Mazepin's Formula One career. Nicknamed Mazepin, he never outran the joke. Every race weekend became a waiting game for the mistake. A half spin in qualifying, a clumsy block in traffic, or just raw pace that left him glued to the back. His father's money got him the seat at Haas, but money couldn't buy credibility. And Mazepin found himself public enemy number one before the first season was even half over. The Russia-Ukraine war ended his career politically, but the truth was, the sport never wanted him anyway. He was remembered less as a driver and more as a meme, the modern embodiment of a crash magnet. Yuji F1 career lasted just 4 races, and somehow that was still too many. He arrived in 2006 with Super Aguri, a team barely scraping the budget together, and immediately looked out of his depth. In Australia, he spun like a rookie. In Imola, he collided with Christian Albers so badly that the FIA stepped in and revoked his super license, a punishment so rare it was practically unheard of. Drivers usually faded out quietly, but Edie was thrown out of the sport mid-season for being a danger on track. It was brutal, but also telling. He wasn't just slow, he was unsafe. To that day, he was remembered less as a competitor and more as the cautionary tale of what happened when you promoted a driver who wasn't ready. Yuji Edie didn't fail, he catastrophically combusted. Level 2, the paid driver's talent didn't buy these seats, money did. They were proof that if your dad owned a company, you too could go wheel to wheel with world champions. Until turn 1. Nicholas Latifi, Abu Dhabi, 2021. One crash changed everything. Latifi's mistake in the final laps didn't just end his race, it flipped the entire championship, handing Verstappen the title in the most controversial finish Formula One had ever seen. That was how Nicholas Latifi became infamous. Not for wins, not for points, but for being the man who triggered history. His 3 seasons at Williams were filled with underwhelming performances, outqualified by George Russell in nearly every session and rarely threatening the midfield. Yet he wasn't hopeless. He scored points at Hungary 2021 and had flashes of competence, but perception stuck harder than reality. To most fans, Latifi wasn't a driver. He was the ultimate pay driver meme. Latifi remembered more for funding Williams and causing chaos than for any achievement behind the wheel. Lance Stroll critics called him a spoiled rich kid. The truth lay somewhere in between. Lance Stroll entered F1, backed by his billionaire father's fortune, buying a Williams seat at 18 after dominating European Formula 3. Instantly, the pay driver label followed him everywhere. But unlike most in that category, Stroll showed flashes of genuine ability. He dragged uncompetitive cars onto podiums, nailed wet weather laps, and proved he was more than just money. Still, the shadow of Lawrence Stroll's ownership of Aston Martin made every success feel conditional, every mistake amplified. He was forever fighting perception. Was he a real talent, or just proof that in F1 cash was still king? For many fans, the money always spoke louder than the results. Level 3, the backmarkers perennial P18 to P20 merchants. They weren't disasters, they were just there. Professional roadblocks for DRS trains and Netflix B role filler. Marcus Ericsson. Marcus Ericsson spent 5 seasons in Formula One and collected a grand total of 18 points. His legacy permanently glued to the back of the grid in Caterhams and Saubers that had no hope of scoring. He wasn't terrible, he was just invisible. Always finishing races, rarely crashing, never doing anything memorable enough to silence the criticism. He became the definition of a backmarker, solid enough to stay in a seat, unremarkable enough to never move forward. Then, in IndyCar, he reinvented himself, winning the Indianapolis 500 and finally proving he had talent, But for F1 fans, the memory stuck. Ericsson was the guy you saw lapped twice on Sunday, the anonymous car blending into the background. His career was a lesson in how easily Formula One could bury competent drivers. Zhu Guanyu made history as China's first Formula One driver in 2022, and his debut season was solid if unspectacular. But his name was etched into memory not for results, but for survival. At Silverstone, his Alfa Romeo flipped upside down, skidded across the gravel, and slammed into the catch fencing in one of the most terrifying accidents in modern F1.
And the roll hoop and the halo very much doing its job before the car digs in, and
he walked away uninjured and instantly became a symbol of how far safety had come. On track, Zhou was competent. He matched Bottas on pace, scored points occasionally, but nothing about him screamed superstar. He was a classic backmarker archetype, respected for what he represented, but rarely the reason you tuned in on Sunday. Zhou might never have escaped that label unless he transformed into more than just a survivor. Level 4. The midfield survivors, dependable, sometimes surprising, but rarely unforgettable. They delivered points, maybe a podium once in a while, but they never became the face of the sport. Esteban Ocon. He won in Hungary 2021, and for one afternoon, Esteban Ocon looked like a future champion. But strip away that miracle, and his career was defined by survival in the midfield. Ocon fought hard, sometimes too hard, clashing with Perez at Force India, refusing to yield to teammates, and always driving like every overtake was life or death. That tenacity kept him on the grid, even when better-funded drivers circled around. Yet despite flashes of brilliance, he never escaped the shadow of mediocrity. He wasn't slow, he wasn't reckless. He was just there, consistently bagging points, never threatening titles. To many, Ocon represented the eternal midfield survivor, tough enough to last, skilled enough to win occasionally, but never quite able to step into the spotlight of greatness. Valtteri Bottas. Valtteri Bottas spent 5 seasons at Mercedes with the best car in the world and still never shook off the nickname Wingman. He won races, delivered poles, and supported Lewis Hamilton's championship campaigns, but when it was time to fight, he faltered. After Mercedes cut him loose, Bottas rebranded himself at Alfa Romeo. Long hair, coffee entrepreneur, cycling enthusiast. He embraced midfield life like he had been freed from prison. But his story was bittersweet. Talented enough to sit at the front, never ruthless enough to own it. Bottas survived in F1 because he was dependable. A safe pair of hands, the man who kept the car in the points. He embodied the survivor tier, too good to vanish, too limited to ever belong among the greats. Level 5. The entertainers. Not always the fastest, but always fun. Big personalities, wild overtakes, insane radio. Basically content machines on wheels. Daniel Ricciardo, he won at Monaco in 2018 with half an engine. Dragging the car around like sheer willpower could replace horsepower. That was Daniel Ricciardo in a nutshell. Fearless dive bombs, huge smiles, and shoeies on the podium. For years, he was one of the best overtakers in F1, launching from impossible angles and making it stick. But when he left Red Bull, the magic faded. Renault showed flashes, McLaren broke him, and suddenly the honey badger looked toothless. Yet fans never abandoned him. Ricciardo entertained no matter the result. His radio calls, his grin, the way he carried himself. Even when he was running 15th, you still wanted to watch him. Ricciardo proved that charisma and courage could matter as much as raw results in keeping a driver beloved. Yuki Tsunoda. Shut up. Yuki Tsunoda screamed down the radio, voice cracking with fury.
Push flat out.
Shut up!
That single outburst captured why fans adored him. He was fiery, emotional, sometimes unpolished, but never boring.
Appreciate it. You gonna bring it up for me as well? Yeah, thanks.
Tsunoda arrived in F1 as Honda's golden boy, quick but inconsistent, spinning out one weekend and finishing in the points the next. Over time, he steadied himself, showing that behind the temper was genuine talent. But even as he matured, the chaos never disappeared. His team radios became viral clips, his on-track aggression a constant talking point.
Yuki, we need to find some pace. He's mainly under braking. Let's do your best. I know it's difficult.
I know, but this brake sucks! What the
In an era where corporate polish made drivers sound like PR robots, Tsunoda was raw. He entertained by being human, messy, and hilarious.
I want to use my front.
We don't want to.
Well, I want to.
Okay, do what you need to do.
You didn't watch Yuki expecting perfection. You watched knowing something memorable would always happen. Level 6. The wildcards. Could have been a podium hero. Could have been in the gravel. When they were hot, they were untouchable. When they weren't, they were memes. Sergio Perez. It was Baku 2021. Max Verstappen crashed out, Lewis Hamilton went wide, and suddenly Sergio Perez was standing on the top step, the king of chaos. Street circuits were his playground. Monaco, Baku, Singapore. If the walls were close, Perez was lethal. He was called the Minister of Defense for holding off Hamilton in Abu Dhabi 2021, a defensive masterclass that helped secure Verstappen's first title. Yet for every brilliant drive, there was a baffling collapse. Poor qualifying, inconsistency, weekends where he looked lost in identical machinery to Max. Perez embodied the wildcard tier, capable of race-winning brilliance, but equally capable of disappearing into the midfield without explanation. When he was on, he looked untouchable. When he was off, you wondered how he was still in a Red Bull seat. Lando Norris. He joked on the radio, he memed on Twitch, and then he pulled off a qualifying lap that left veterans stunned. Lando Norris was the new generation's darling, talented, charismatic, and always entertaining. But he was also frustrating. He scored podiums, set blistering laps, and looked every bit a future champion. Yet the killer instinct hadn't fully arrived. At Sochi 2021, he was leading in the rain, on the verge of his first win, and refused to pit. The victory vanished in a single decision. That moment summed up Norris. Brilliant, but unfinished. Capable of greatness, but still learning how to close. Fans loved him because he felt relatable. Young, reckless, imperfect, but until he turned potential into silverware, he remained a wild card. Dangerous, fun, but not yet legendary. Level 7. The untouchables. The gods of the grid. They didn't just win, they dominated. Names were etched in history, with records that felt impossible, until they broke them again. Lewis Hamilton. It was Interlagos 2021. Hamilton started from the back of the grid after disqualification, car problems, and penalty. By Sunday, he sliced through the field like the laws of physics didn't apply. That drive wasn't just a win, it was a statement. 7 world championships, more poles than anyone in history, and victories across every era of machinery. Hamilton turned dominance into routine. His wheel-to-wheel fight with Rosberg defined one generation. His title battles with Verstappen defined another. Critics called him lucky for having the best car, but you didn't stumble into records like his. He was relentless, adaptable, and lethal under pressure. Hamilton belonged here not because of stats alone, but because when the lights went out, everyone else knew they were racing for second. Michael Schumacher, Japan 2000. Michael Schumacher crossed the line, tears streaming in his helmet, ending Ferrari's 21-year title drought. That single moment captured his legacy. Relentless work ethic, total domination, and the ability to drag an entire team to glory. He rewrote what it meant to be a Formula One driver. Fitness, testing, precision, turning Ferrari into a dynasty with 5 straight championships. But Schumacher was also ruthless. Collisions with Hill and Villeneuve, controversy at Monaco, a win-at-all-costs mentality that made him feared as much as admired. He retired with 7 titles, 91 wins, and a reputation as the man who raised the ceiling of possibility. For a generation, Schumacher wasn't just a driver, he was the definition of Formula One greatness, the benchmark against which all others were measured. Max Verstappen. It was Zandvoort 2021. Orange smoke filled the stands as Max Verstappen won at home, the Dutch crowd roaring like a stadium. In that moment, the new era began. Verstappen was raw aggression turned into perfection, late braking, elbows out, relentless pace. His 2021 title fight with Hamilton was one of the fiercest in history, ending in the chaos of Abu Dhabi. From there, he unleashed total domination, breaking records for wins in a season, shattering points totals, and crushing teammates without mercy. Critics once called him reckless. Now, he was surgical. Verstappen raced like a predator, efficient, brutal, unstoppable. At just 25, he was already building a dynasty that threatened to rival Schumacher's and Hamilton's. He wasn't just untouchable then. He looked set to redefine what untouchable meant.